Welcome back to MyFinJourney, the podcast that explores how people grow and how they build freedom. Today, I'm joined by someone who doesn't just understand leadership, strategy, and money, he's lived it at the highest levels. Sidney Evans is a global strategist, executive coach, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of Run Your Own Race. He's trained over 1,000 professionals, spoken on international stages, and been featured in Forbes, Oracle, and more. Today, we're going to dig a bit deeper. We'll talk about intentional growth, why most people fail before they even start, and how emotional intelligence could be the most underrated tool in your financial playbook. Whether you're an entrepreneur, investor, or just someone trying to take back control of your life, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Sidney, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you.
No problem, Sidney. So I wanted to dive right in and I wanted to really understand, walk us through your journey so far, specifically with respect to belief that you held early on in your career or in life about money or success and how that turned out to be completely wrong.
Right. So, walking you through my journey. I started in corporate, was separated from that company. I went back and got my MBA. And when I went back and got my MBA, I really went back to have some tools to really utilize to not only have a toolkit to understand money better, but also how to manage money and also how to manage my relationship with money. I started writing from there. I didn't write the book till later on. I just started writing articles around brands and their relationship with money. And so I wrote articles for Forbes, for Branding Mag. I've interviewed a lot of CEOs. And I can tell you this, money is one of these things that you really, really have to have clarity around what the purpose of it is. Because if you don't have clarity around the purpose, it will purposely define you, right? So I never let money define me. It's a tool. It's a tool to be utilized to add value. So one of my biggest things that I'm focused on is adding value because I believe when you always add value, the money will follow.
I love it, Sidney. A lot of what you said really resonated with me because these are a lot of things that I don't think people learn in school, whether it's in their undergraduate or in their MBA programs or anything like this. So when you say money is a tool, obviously I'm biased, I agree with you. But for the listener, it might be the first time they're hearing this. So help me understand from your perspective, number one, when did you learn this?
Right.
And number two, if it's a tool and you need clarity around it and you need to use money with your purpose in mind, a lot of these terms are things that people don't hear in mainstream media, mainstream education. So I really want to understand how you came across or how you got to this conclusion.
So I'll tell you flat out, I learned it really from my late grandmother. So my late grandmother owned a significant amount of property in Philadelphia. What I learned from her is understanding that property was just a vehicle for her to really realize her goals. It really is a function of the relationship of it. What I think is not taught that much is what do you want money for? So if you're not intentional around thinking about what you want money for, again, it's going to overtake your whole life. So she was intentional around the property she bought. She was also adding value, right? She had Section 8 housing. She was adding value to people in the community. Through that, she got more money, right? When you get more money, what are you going to do with the money? What is your relationship with money? And I think people really need to sit and think about what their relationship is with money, like they think about a partner. That's the way I would look at it. You want something that's healthy, something that communicates with you properly, right? And also something that gives you a platform to help other people and help the other person.
I love that, Sidney. And I kind of want to maybe rewind a little bit and go back because it felt like your late grandmother had this vision of investing in Section 8 housing, which some people would say is like, oh, you're like a slumlord, you're not improving it, you're just not really adding value. But you clearly delineate that, hey, she's buying this and she's adding value. She's providing somewhere for people to live because people need to live somewhere.
Correct.
And then she's actually improving the conditions. So now they're living, let's say, ideally in a better type of product than maybe the surrounding environment. So she's really leading by creating value.
Correct.
And then she's monetizing off of that value. And sometimes people think making money is bad. And so it's like, hey, I shouldn't make money or I'm making money at someone's expense. But you said it very aptly when you said, hey, optimize to create value and then monetize off of that value while understanding that money is fundamentally a tool to build that lifestyle that you want, or in your case, your late grandmother wanted to build for herself.
Absolutely. And let me clarify by stating my grandma was not a slumlord at all. And I do understand how people think that Section 8 or whatever might be that. But to your point, people need somewhere to live. But what I would also argue, Mustafa, is you start where you are, right? She started where she was. She started at the place that she could add value, and that was Section 8. And then she grew to other things. but you have to really start where you are. But again, nothing happens, quite frankly, nothing happens unless you have clarity around what the end goal is. You really have to have clarity before you start any. And so I wrote an article, this was many moons ago, that every corporation has to have a philanthropic component to their business. And the reason I state that so clearly, I wrote that article over 7 years ago, and it holds true even more today, because what I would argue is the more that you add value and the more that you have value creation, right? So when you have value creation, ability is your responsibility to share that or share a portion of that. And what I would argue is when you do that, it comes back to you tenfold.
No, I would agree. And I think that's why when you start by saying the purpose is so important, I think it's really about digging deeper to say, hey, what type of life do I want to live? And it's not like what's trending on social media. It's not what anyone else is doing, but it's really understanding your own race. Basically, your book, run your own race, right? You need to understand your journey, what you're looking to accomplish. And it's the same vein with the podcast, MyFinJourney. It's really to understand that if you're not intentional about your life, you're not going to get where you're trying to go. If you're not intentional with your money and understanding where it's being put to work, then it's not going to grow how you want, and you're not going to be able to live that lifestyle that you're looking for. And I think you touched on it very eloquently to say you start where you are. Your grandmother was in Philly. She invested in Philly. She invested in real estate, I assume, because it made sense to her. Where she could look at it and see.
By the way, she was a teacher. So you can imagine, she was on a teacher's salary investing in real estate. So please.
No, exactly. So it's one of those things that nothing happens unless you take action.
Correct.
And I'm sure you work with so many high performers. I'd love to understand from your perspective, the value of taking action with respect to somebody who's viewed as a high performer and somebody who's viewed as a low performer, whether that's socioeconomically in terms of income levels or in terms of people in the same job role.
So I don't delineate based on socioeconomic. I think that's one of the dangers of social media. Actually, my book, Run Your Own Race, was written based on, I'll give you a quick little story. I think you might enjoy the story. So many moons ago, I was in New York City and I met this gentleman and we were just hanging out, talking in a restaurant, speaking. And he said, do you know why horses wear blinders in the Kentucky Derby? And I said, no, I had no idea. I thought it was a fascinating question. He said, so they can run their own race. That was 10 years before I wrote the book. And it stuck with me so much because I spent the earlier part of my life really focused on what other people are doing, looking left, looking right. And I never, ever ran my own race. So it's such a great analogy for life with the Kentucky Derby. And by the way, he happened to be a jockey in the Kentucky Derby. So that's why he
Beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. So I think it's vitally important that you run your own race and you don't chase left or right. Social media, like I said, can be really dangerous in that regard, with making people believe something exists that oftentimes doesn't exist, right? And so that's one aspect of it. But in relation to your question, high performer, low performer, that's really about value creation. I mean, that's really about value. So what I would argue is the highest performers are adding the most value. That's how I delineate. Everything I delineate is based on value creation. And value creation doesn't necessarily equal money per se. Because remember, there's a lot of different currencies. So you have currency in a lot of different ways. Money is just one form of currency. But if you don't have clarity and a strategy, to your point, a strategy around what you will do when you get money, then you really need to take a step back and think about that. Because once you get it, it's a hard thing to kind of wrap your hands around when you don't have clarity and a strategy before prior.
I love that, Sidney. And I'm taking notes because I'm also trying to learn, right? So I think there's a couple of things that you said that I really loved. And before I get into it, I want to highlight something that you said that resonated very deeply, that social media can be dangerous. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, YouTube is dangerous. Take a second, pause the video, like, subscribe, because it's one of those things that like fire is dangerous.
Right.
But you need it to cook your food. Like you're going to have your steak, you need fire.
100%.
So it's one of those things that all of these platforms, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, like, subscribe, comment on all of those platforms, but they are dangerous in the sense that you get what you put in. Right. If I open my Instagram, I'm not getting flashy cars.
Correct.
I'm getting like podcast reels like this.
Correct.
It's just like hitting me with information because that's what I interact with and engage with. And the other thing that I thought you said was very interesting was that there are different types of currency. People think of currency and they think of money. Now today, maybe they think of Bitcoin or some cryptocurrency. But I think we're in an age of information overload. And one of the most important currencies is people's attention.
Correct.
And you could look at Facebook. What is Meta today is maybe one of the early companies that was able to actually monetize off of attention. They built an MVP for college kids. They went out and IPO'd. and investment analysts at that point were looking at how are they going to monetize. There isn't enough ad revenue space to justify this value or this apparent enterprise value at a company level. And then they created all these different streams of monetization that didn't exist before. So to your point, Sydney, when people are running their own race, or rather when people are living their life, it's typically more of a keeping up with the Joneses mentality. My neighbor next door just got an M5, let me go out and get the same. Or my neighbor got a bigger house, let me go buy a bigger house. For you, Sydney, and I'm sure you mentioned it in the book, I really want to understand from your perspective, why is it that so many people are focused on what everyone else is doing and not really able to kind of slow down and really be intentional with their own journey?
It's 3 letters, EGO, 3 letters called ego. So ego precipitates a lot of that behavior. What I think people don't ask the question is, why did the person get the M5? Why did the person get the bigger house? So what I would argue is that everybody has a different intention and reason around why they're doing something. Now, mind you, like I lived in Miami for a bit. A lot of people get Ferraris because they're insecure. So just because you have a Ferrari doesn't mean you're secure, right? So a lot of that's based on insecurity, in my opinion. And listen, I have nothing against Ferrari. I love Ferraris, right? I don't own one, but I love Ferraris. But the point is, why did the person get that? And I think you run into a really dangerous trap. And so I don't think all of social media is bad, by the way. I want to clarify. I don't think all of it's bad. I do think there are a lot of great aspects of it, of community, of interacting, of connecting people worldwide that never would have been connected. I think that stuff is amazing. But to your point, if you don't have stasis point, some balance in your life around who you are and what your intention is and what you value, you will look at that and you think, man, this person is happy because they're living in this big mansion for it. I know people with a lot of money that are incredibly unhappy, because it goes back to my statement earlier. What makes you happy? People really have to sit and think about what makes you happy. And what I would argue is people believe that money will make them happy. What I would say is, maybe the things that money brings for you can make you happy, right? So for me, money brings a level of freedom, of the ability to choose more. That's why it would mean more to me. But for some people, like I said, it's just ego. Like they just want to have it to say, I got the bigger house, I got the bigger car. But what does that mean at the end of the day, right? So what does that say about you if that's what you're chasing? And I'm not saying anything derogatory about anybody who's chasing, because I think competitiveness is really great. I think it's awesome. And we're built on a society of competitiveness, on capitalism. So that aspect is amazing. But again, you have to have clarity around what it means to you and what you will do with it.
I love it, Sydney. And just to kind of fill in my perspective on that, it's one of those things that like either extreme is bad. You want to find your level of balance. You mentioned ego precipitates decision making. So then it's to say, hey, if like I'm buying that nicer house just because my next door neighbor is not necessarily because it's what I want, then how does that impact my financial stability? And to me, Sydney, it's one of the reasons why so many people don't gain wealth. I know we were talking earlier about your grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, she's on a teacher's salary, whatever that was back in the day. Not necessarily something associated with 6-figure, 7-figure type
Probably
income.
less than 30,000.
Probably less than 30,000. And still she's able to build up that portfolio. She's able to build up that financial freedom because you're dedicated. And it's like that story of like the millionaire next door, right? The person who is kind of living below their means because they're spending their money intentionally on what makes them happy, to then have that lifestyle design to really get what money is like supposed to bring you, which is that freedom. It's a tool that ideally helps you build freedom. But if you just spend it on the wrong things, then you're actually building your own prison where you have a beautiful big house, but you're struggling, like you're house rich, cash poor. You're kind of enclosed by that and it doesn't really bring you happiness. So I'm really curious to understand from your perspective, Sydney, just because you do coach so many different people and you have such a wealth of experience, why do you think so many people aren't like, they get caught up in the grind and the hustle and they're not building intentionally?
That's a hard question. I think it's a combination of things. I really think it does go back to clarity again for me. They're just not clear around what the end goal is. So a lot of what I do when I coach, ask one question to startups I go, what's the goal and what are you actually selling? So what's your goal and what are you actually selling? And I can't tell you how many startups or executives or people that I've worked with coaching them where they really can't answer that question. They really can't answer the question, what's the goal? Like, what's the goal? Like just simple, open-ended, what's the goal?
So I think, as an entrepreneur myself, right, my goal, what am I selling? I'll answer those questions right now. What's the goal? To help as many people as possible. What am I selling? Financial literacy.
Mhm.
Now, for me, it gets annoying when you say, okay, who's your target avatar? Who is the one person you're specifically targeting your message to? I'm like, everybody. And then you go through that journey as an entrepreneur where you realize, hey, if you're more specific about who your actual avatar is, who you're actually targeting, who you're actually trying to help, then you're in a better position to actually help that person.
Right. What I would argue is you're selling financial education, right? The tailoring of how you're selling it, I would tailor it to different people differently, right? So there's a certain customer set that needs to hear certain things about financial education. There's another customer set that needs to hear it a different way. And then there's another set that already knows about financial education. They might just need a little boost around a certain area. So I think that it does segment down to your point around avatars, but I don't think you need avatars. I do think you need to segment out what education you're selling to who and what's the value creation for them.
Exactly. And then it circles back to what you said about monetizing, right? In this case, it's a podcast. I'm selling it for free. So what am I capturing? Attention. Why am I capturing that attention? To genuinely uplift people, because this is my version of charity, right? Like you talked about how a business needs to be
Philanthropic.
portioning some of it to charity, to giving back. And to me, it's to say, hey, like I got to a point where I didn't necessarily need to worry about money. I did it through real estate. I have a strong bias towards real estate. I think it's the best place to build financial freedom, but it doesn't come overnight. You kind of have to work in that job. For me, I had a W-2 in the pharmaceutical industry, and then I saved my extra money to invest in real estate, to build out strategies for myself, and then build a product around that to build out strategies for others. So now when people want to make money passively, I'm in a position to do that. And then you can take on passion projects like this, where you just say, hey, fundamentally having that clarity and understanding myself enabled me to figure out how to monetize. And that enabled me to be in a position to build freedom. And now that enables me to be in a position to pay that forward to others, while recognizing that everyone's journey of knowing themselves is different. Everyone is in their own race. So if you're in your own race, how can I help everyone? It's to just focus on the common theme, which is investing in yourself,
Right.
which is building financial literacy, and kind of understanding that maybe what we're traditionally taught in school is not going to get us there. And that's why I wanted to circle back, if you don't mind, Sydney. I know earlier in the conversation, you mentioned going and maybe leaving the workspace to go out and get your MBA. So I'm curious to understand, because there's a theme online about how education is bad, going to college is too expensive, getting your MBA is maybe not a good ROI. So I'm very curious to hear your perspective, because it feels like you do work with a lot of professionals who are probably also very educated. And I think everyone would value learning and growing. But then the question from a lot of people's perspective is an MBA the most efficient use of time and capital?
Right. So what I would argue is that's changed over time. So I got my MBA over 10 years ago. There's not a correlation to me for degree and how smart is relative, right? I never say somebody has a PhD, so they're smarter. Somebody went to Harvard, they're smarter. That doesn't make you smart. So that's just start there. What I would argue is clarity around what you're going to school for. I didn't go back and get my MBA to get a better job or anything. I didn't really have to go back and do that. I went for two purposes. The one purpose was I was 38 years old and I wanted to show myself that I still had the discipline to complete something so rigorous for me. It was incredibly rigorous. And I wanted to show, I don't have any kids, but at some point, if I do have kids, I wanted them to see that you can do this at 38 and still get back in the mix. I was in class with folks that were in their 20s who were faster, better, stronger, right? So they were much more disciplined than I was. But that said, I went back for that reason. So what I would argue is with AI, it might be a different conversation for you today. Maybe the conversation is you don't want to get your MBA, but that's a personal decision. I will never, ever, anybody who knows me knows that I will never discount the value in increasing your skill sets and having more tools to have in your armamentarium. You need a toolkit and a tool set. So I went back to refine certain parts or certain gaps that I had in my competency level.
What is one piece of financial advice or financial literacy that you feel like a lot of people you speak to kind of need to hear?
Don't fall in love with money. Don't fall in love with money. I think that a lot of people need to understand that you can be happy having what people consider less money. You can be happy across the paradigm around a lot of things. And don't chase what you think someone else has because you believe they're happy. I know I work with a lot of folks, they're like, oh, they're doing this. And it's a famous strategy called, the blue ocean strategy. So blue ocean strategy is, technically you're a shark in the ocean. Set your own strategy. It's a wide open, ocean. Set your own strategy, because oftentimes a lot of companies that I work with, a lot of startups, they're like, well, they did it that way. Well, they did it that way, but it doesn't mean you have to do it that way. So blue ocean strategy is something that I always look to say, listen, And by the way, you might look at a whole different area, a whole different industry group to get some ideas on how to invest in money and how to make money. So think about different ways that you can set your own path and, to your point, run your own race.
I love it, Sydney. And I think to some degree, it might be annoying to hear for people because it's so much easier to copy someone else's playbook than it is to sit down, be quiet, and just think in your own head of where am I uniquely positioned? Let's go back to your grandmother because it's just so educational, right? She's working as a teacher. She's presumably doing what she loves and adding value for people. And at the same time, to some degree, she probably realizes that she doesn't have enough to get to where she wants to be. So it's to say, hey, like I have some breadcrumbs. Let me save a little bit of that bread on the side. Let me invest that in real estate.
By the way, 5 kids.
I love it. My father was also one of 5. So I'm going to save a little bit for a rainy day. And as that builds up, I'm going to invest and I'm going to continue to do that. And that's going to be my blue ocean strategy. It's not about anyone else. It's about me running my own race. But I think the reason why it doesn't resonate with a lot of people is because it can be very difficult to think of what is the one thing I'm uniquely positioned to execute on, right? It's so much easier to say, hey, I don't have enough money because I'm making 30K and I want to buy a new BMW. You can't afford it. Buy a used car. It's okay, right? Save a little bit right now, keep your expenses low, and then tomorrow you can go out and buy that Ferrari if that's what you want, if that's what will actually make you happy. But don't buy it because someone else is saying so. And I'm curious to kind of hear from your perspective, Sydney, why do you think it is that so many people don't really kind of slow down and really build out their own blue ocean strategy?
Well, let me tell you this. So my grandmother, I vividly remember, I was in elementary school when she first started buying property. She spent like $1,000 on this green van. And she would literally pick me up from school. After she was done school, she picked me up from school. She had all her tools in the back of the green van. It's all about, living below your means. She would fix the stuff in the houses herself in the beginning. She didn't even hire, she had like a little handyman, but she would literally, she learned plumbing. She couldn't do electrical work, but she learned small plumbing, obviously, not big plumbing stuff. But she learned how to fix little patches in floors and patches in walls. And we used to paint together when I was 10, 11 years old. She did this stuff by hand, brick by brick. So to your point, living below your means is phenomenal, but also understanding that you have the power to do this stuff. You don't always need somebody to help you do something. You have the power to do it. If my grandmother could do it, working all day as a teacher with 5 kids, and she raised me, and to just get a van for $1,000 and fix stuff on her own, and then to end up, well, she had, I think it was just a testament of everything this podcast is about. It really, really is about understanding that you have the power to do it, understanding the competencies that you don't have, understanding that you have to invest in yourself. You have to. So whether you don't want to get your MBA, that's fine. I'm not telling you have to get your but you have to still invest in yourself. Always. I believe in a principle called Kaizen, and Kaizen is a Japanese principle. Always be learning, continuous improvement. Kaizen, continuous improvement. I read so much, it's not even funny. I watch documentaries on stuff that's completely out of my wheelhouse, but I do that on purpose because I'm trying to get different neurotransmitters to fire in my head around different ways that I want to learn and different ways that I want to approach things. So I think it's vitally important that you do that. Don't just stay in your own box. Understand that there's other boxes that can teach you things. I remember there was an interview many moons ago with Bill Gates, where he said, I read Vogue, I read Cosmo. And you think, why would Bill Gates be? Well, because he wants to know a little bit about everything and have his touch points on everything. Now, what I would argue is the science behind that is it helps you fire different neurotransmitters.
I love that, Sydney. I got goosebumps, especially when you started by telling the story of your grandmother, because I'm very much of the mindset that like diversification is actually a problem because people diversify too early, but it's like a journey you're on, right? Like, for example, I was in the pharmaceutical industry, vigilance, which is drug safety, basically working in drug development. For anyone who's listening, basically imagine the cost center of a business. Imagine like the police of the pharmaceutical industry, just making sure everything is safe, right? For your grandmother, she was a teacher. There probably aren't many teachers, if any, making like, 10 million a year type numbers. There's very few. So you're looking at it saying, hey, I'm in a profession that I'm probably not going to monetize the way that I quote unquote need to get to my goals, because money is a tool, but you need to have enough tools to accomplish your goals. So that is to say, hey, the skill set I'm in or the job I'm in is not going to get me enough money to get to where I want to be. So I need another tool. I need another skill that I can monetize off. For your grandmother, for me, it was real estate, where you build out that tool, you diversify away from what your core, your base is, your foundation is, and then you build up a skill that is more monetizable. Then you monetize off that skill. And then at some point you look at it and you say, hey, there's all these other shiny skills I can learn. And I will allocate resources to learn them. But that doesn't mean that I should sell all my real estate and go do that.
Correct.
It's to say that, hey, fundamentally, you built your base. Your base enabled you to build your financial freedom, diversify as much as you want. But really, fundamentally, don't forget to kind of just continue investing in yourself and then really scale.
You never go wrong investing in yourself. That goes back to the MBA conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whether you want to get an MBA or whatever, grad school, or you never, ever go wrong, ever go wrong investing in yourself, in my opinion.
So if you were talking to the 22-year-old version of Sidney and you had $100 internet connection and the current knowledge that you have, what would you do to build wealth in this economy?
$100 at 22, what I do, I would probably start developing a personal brand at 22. I would have, well, obviously social media wasn't a thing when I was 22, but if I were 22 today with $100, which is, not a significant amount of money, I would get in front of a camera and kind of do what you're doing and start talking and creating value around some topic or something that I knew. And I would do it over and over and over again. Essentially what Mr. Beast did, right? Mr. Beast was making videos since he was, 8, 9, 10 years old in the room. If you look at these old videos of him, he just got in front of a camera and just started recording, talking, being himself. The other thing is you have to be super authentic. I think the other thing is, it's really tricky because money can change you 100%. Social media only throws gasoline on that fire if you don't know who you are first. So if you don't know who you are, it literally will throw gasoline on the fire. So you really have that clarity, but you also have to be authentic. But that's what I would do if I had $100 today. I would get in front of a camera and start speaking about what I knew the best.
I love that, Sidney, because as you were developing that answer, I'm like, yeah, but. And each time you're answering it, it's, you're going to build a social media, you're going to build a personal brand. Yeah, but I don't know anything. Then you answer, yeah, but you're going to do it authentically about what you do know. Great. So you're not like a fake guru online, which is maybe most of the content. So you're like authentically you, 100% agree. And then you tied it to somebody that people can research, Mr. Beast, and they can see like how well he does. And then using that skill set to diversify into different skills or different business opportunities that he wanted to. But fundamentally it came from him just understanding himself.
Correct.
But one question that I have for you, Sidney, is the mentality that like what got you here won't get you there, or the mentality that, people change over time. And I don't necessarily think that's reflective of ego or money, but I want to hear kind of from your perspective, as you also invest a lot in yourself. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Well, the thing is, evolve or die. If you're not changing, I don't know what you're doing. So I've changed a lot over the course of the years. I've changed a whole lot. And I would argue that each change, I got a little more clarity around really truly what my goal was, right? I worked in pharma as well in the beginning, corporate. When I left there, I said, listen, but also I know I say clarity a lot and I say it a lot because I think it's super, super important because I'm so clear around setting boundaries. And so when I left, corporate, I said, I'm not going back to doing that. Not in the same way that I did it. So I think that you have to set boundaries for yourself. And for me, I was like, I'm not going back in the same way that I did it. And always keep leveling up, keep leveling up. Each little rung on the ladder of your life, keep leveling up. It's vitally important. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about take a step up in a knowledge base, different place. I lived overseas for the last 11 years, by the way. I just got back to the States. So for me, going overseas where I finished my book was a different way to kind of fire new neurotransmitters in my brain, right? So do something that always helps you level up. It doesn't necessarily have to be around money.
I love that, Sidney. So with respect to kind of you and just the value creation that you look to provide, help us understand, what do you do day to day? Like who do you work with and what problems do you solve?
Right. So I work with a lot of executives. Right now I focus a lot on personal branding. Obviously Run Your Own Race went #1, which was amazing. And I was super lucky that my first book went #1. But I work with a lot of executives and startups now, and I work with them now around a lot of EIQ. So I'm doing a lot of emotional intelligence training and disc training because I'm going to go out on a limb here and tell you that there is a relationship between emotional intelligence. And if you don't know what it is, you guys can look it up. I'm sure you're a very smart audience that knows what it is. But there's a relationship between emotional intelligence now with AI that directly links to financial sustainability, in my opinion. And you really, really have to have a high level of emotional intelligence. So I'm focused really right now on a lot of emotional intelligence, a lot of team building stuff I'm doing right now with organizations, a lot of team building, like I said, disc training. And when I work specifically with people, I'm really taking them from here to there, executives. I work with the highest level executives and I'm taking them from here to there. So what does that mean? Taking them from there, here to here? Well, depends on what their goal is. And like I told you before, I start with one question. What's the goal? What are you selling? Like, what are you selling? And it's ironic to me how many people I meet who contact me, by the way, and I look at their LinkedIn and it either happens where I speak with them and I look at their LinkedIn, I'm like, something's not matching here for me. Like, like something's not matching. Either the LinkedIn doesn't have clarity around who they are, what they're doing, or I speak with it. I'm like, wow. So what I would argue is go through your social media and really refine who you are and what you're selling and make sure you have clarity around that. Cause I can't tell you how many people I meet. I'm like, or companies that seem like, is that what you're really selling? Listen, Gucci is not selling handbags. Ralph Lauren is not selling clothes. He's selling luxury. Chanel is selling a lifestyle. So when I say, of course they're selling handbags, right? But the overarching point is they're really selling a lifestyle. Ralph Lauren for sure is selling a lifestyle. Polo, right? And Chanel is selling a lifestyle and luxury. So you have to understand, what are you actually selling as a person?
I love that, Sydney. I love that, man. And for you, like when it comes to circling back, right? When it comes to those people, understanding what are they selling, for me, it also leads to the question, okay, what are they selling? How are they monetizing? What are they investing in? Like this is all, and I notice a parallel where sometimes these executives that I work with, they might make crazy money,
Mm-hmm.
but they have no free time. And they're looking at it saying, hey, I want to do X, I want to do Y, but I can't because I don't have free time. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective. I don't know if those types of conversations come up about opportunity cost or about where people are investing or what their mentality is.
It doesn't really come up so much in my conversation with them. What I do tell them, we speak a lot around allocation, right? So what I would argue is a lot of companies so I was working with a firm overseas that was launching a product and they wanted to allocate a lot of their money to opening new stores. And I strongly said that you should allocate it in a different way. I said you really should allocate it in a more personal way. I thought the hard fixed cost of the real estate in that scenario wasn't a good allocation for where they were as a business. And so I told them to allocate it in a completely different way. So we have a lot of conversation around allocation of funds for companies.
And I feel like it all circles back to that clarity, like you mentioned earlier, right? If you know where it keeps coming up, because you kind of need to know where you're at, what your goals are, and how you're going to get there, while also understanding that you need to create your own strategy and it needs to play to your strengths rather than just copying someone else's strategy, because that was built for them to play to their strengths.
Absolutely.
So, Sydney, I really love the conversation. I was curious for the listener if they wanted to reach out to you, if they wanted to either inquire about coaching, learn more about your approach to clarity, or just have a casual conversation with you. What is the best way for people to connect with you?
SydneyEvansGlobal.com.
Beautiful.
SydneyEvansGlobal.com. On LinkedIn, it's Sidney E, which is Sidney E, not Evans spelled out. And you'll see a picture of me, a keynote picture of me on stage on my pictures, and Empower Your Legacy at the top. And if you want to buy my book, Run Your Own Race is still out there. I did the audiobook, by the way. I recorded it myself. So if you want the audiobook for Run Your Own Race, that would be amazing. But SydneyEvansGlobal.com. And I truly am humbled that you would have me on, Mustafa. I'm sure your audience is super intelligent and bright and financially literate and have a lot of clarity. So thank you so much. I'm truly humbled.
You're too kind. I think it's one of those things, like you mentioned, we just have to continually invest in self-education and then continue to grow. And then along that process, we get further clarity on what our goals are and how to realize them. So what I'll do, Sydney, is I'll include all of those links in the show notes. Once again, Sydney, I want to thank you for joining us today. When I think about our conversation, it kind of leads me to conclude and reflect on the fact that success isn't accidental. It's built with clarity, discipline, and you even alluded to emotional clarity and emotional IQ, which I think is very interesting. But you have to be ruthlessly intentional about what you want to achieve. So Sydney, thanks again for reminding us that financial growth starts inside with mindset, habits, and the courage to run your own race, even when no one's cheering.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And stay consistent. Stay consistent. Stay consistent. We didn't talk about consistency, but stay consistent.
I agree. Consistency is also critical. But if this conversation challenged you, inspired you, do two things. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Follow MyFinJourney. And maybe a third thing, connect with Sidney Evans. Check out his website. Until next time, stay intentional, stay disciplined, stay consistent, and remember, your future self is listening to what you do today.